On Wednesday evenings this fall, we're looking at a series of parables, the parables of Jesus. And they're quite remarkable indeed. Wonderful lessons that Jesus shared with the people of his day and time and have been preserved for us in Holy Scripture. You and I can continue in the 21st century to glean the benefit of hearing these vital and pertinent lessons. Tonight we will be looking at the parable of the unforgiving and merciful servant from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 18, 21 through 35. I didn't realize until a few moments ago that the white font is not showing through very clearly on the screen behind me, so we'll try to make some correction to that in the very near future. If you're taking notes and would be interested in recording this just for next week, Lord willing, our study will be coming from Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 through 30. Again, that's Matthew 13, 24 through 30, verses 36 through 43, as we look at the parable of the weeds and the wheat. That will be, Lord willing, next Wednesday evening. We want to begin, as we most often do, by looking at the text itself. And we'll do that now from Matthew chapter 18, 21 through 35. I'll be reading here from the ESV. Then Peter came up and said to him, Lord, how often will my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 77 times. Therefore the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his servants. When he began to settle, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. And since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold, with his wife and children, and all that he had, and payment to be made. So the servant fell on his knees, imploring him, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. But when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. And seizing him, he began to choke him, saying, pay me what you owe. So his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, have patience with me, and I will pay you. He refused, and went and put him in prison until he should pay the debt. His fellow servants saw what had taken place. They were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. Then his master summoned him and said to him, you wicked servant, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant as I had mercy on you? And in anger his master delivered him to the jailers until he should pay all his debt. So also my heavenly Father will do to every one of you if you do not forgive your brother from your heart. So this is, there's a lot of teaching in the Scripture about forgiveness. We study about God's forgiveness, and that is a part of this study tonight. We study about the teaching of the apostles and our Lord, and all through the New Testament, there's teaching about the need to forgive. But perhaps in all of that, there's no greater text that we can turn to this evening where we can learn so much about how imperative it is that we forgive one another. We must learn to forgive. So as we look at this text tonight, as we look it over and discuss some things, hopefully we will have some discussion that will be of help to us. What did Jesus, we're looking at here the context, what it was that the occasion, why Jesus shared this particular parable with his disciples at this given point in time. And so we begin by asking the question, what had Jesus been speaking about and just prior to this parable? Okay, he has been talking about forgiveness, right? He's been talking about the need and how to handle a given situation when a brother has trespassed against you. And Rush, you may have it open there. What does Jesus say here in that context? Please. Thank you, Russ. So Jesus here is teaching how you and I are to handle a situation when we are offended, when we are hurt, when someone has done us wrong. He teaches that we're not to go spread it publicly. That's not the first recourse. First of all, we're supposed to go personally and privately to the individual and try to seek reconciliation on that personal basis. That's very important. It's very important toward reconciliation. It's very important toward the peace, stability, the unity of the body of Christ. And so you and I need to remember here what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 18 about how to handle a situation when we are mistreated, when maybe someone's taking advantage of us. So any number of things can occur through the course of a given week or any period of time where someone does us wrong. We're not perfect people. You and I, we're all human. We all fall short. We all fail one another. And so Jesus teaches here that in the event that you're unsuccessful, if he will not hear you, then the next step is to take one or two with you. And hopefully, because of this reasoning, a small group of two or three, hopefully this individual will listen. And he will do what he needs to do by way of repenting and acknowledging his error. And healing, forgiveness and healing can take place. But in the event that he will not hear the two or three men, Jesus teaches to take it to the family of God, take it to the brethren in the church, and try to seek reconciliation that way. And Jesus says that he will not hear the whole church, then let it be, he's actually, for all intents and purposes, he has withdrawn himself from the body of faithful believers. Let it be counted as a heathen or a Gentile and a publican or a tax collector. So Jesus here is talking about forgiveness in this larger context. And so the Bible says that, I'm going to have myself. So to whom was Jesus speaking here? Sometimes Jesus speaks to scribes and Pharisees. Sometimes he's speaking to a large group of people. Not necessarily believers, but who is he speaking to on this occasion here? Okay, he's speaking to his disciples. He's speaking to those who do in fact believe on him. They're following after him. And so, if the church had been established at this particular point in time, which it hadn't, but he would have been talking to the church. He would have been talking to his people. He would have been talking to Christians. And so the things that are being described here are for us as to how we're to interact, how we're to relate to each other, pertaining to times of hardship and when the unity of the body is threatened by injury. So what prompted this parable about the unforgiving servant? Directly, what was it? What was Jesus responding to? He was responding to Peter's question. Lord, my brother offends me, my brother is taking advantage of me, my brother harms me in some way. How many times should I forgive him? Should I forgive him 7 times? No doubt Peter was expecting to hear some words of congratulations by Jesus. That's magnanimous of you, Peter, that you're willing to forgive your brother 7 times. But Peter and the others were about to be disappointed. That's what they thought that was being very generous. It's been suggested that the rabbis of the day, they taught that 3 times was sufficient. That a person was not obligated to forgive beyond the 3rd offense. And so if someone offended you beyond that, the 4th time on, then, all bets are off, retaliation is forward, you don't have to forgive. And supposedly, they believed that and taught that based upon Amos chapter 1, 3 and following, where God speaking through Amos, he talks to the southern and the northern kingdoms, and he's talking about what God is going to do to bring judgment upon Israel's enemies. A number of times he says, for 3 offenses and for 4, I will not, I can't remember the exact terminology, but I will not what?
Revoke his punishment.
Thank you. Will not revoke, it's the second time you helped me out here tonight, thanks. Will not revoke the punishment. So your enemies are going to get it. If they go too far, if they offend more than 3 times, God said, I'm going to punish them. I'm going to punish them. And so, likely the rabbis are reasoning that God is God, and if 3 times was sufficient for God in that context, then certainly He would look favorably on us as only forgiven 3 times. That was probably the rationale. So Peter here, he is saying, things are different. We're following Christ. We're going to go from 3 to 7. We're going to double it and add 1 for good measure. If my brother offends me 7 times, is that good, God? Lord, is that good? And Jesus says, no, not 7 times, Peter. Some translations have 77 times. The King Standard Version has. There's some others as well. The King James Version has 70 times 7. And there's a question about one of the words here as to whether it was meant to be a short word, a written from 3. I would have been 7. But if we get, so that may mean an abbreviation. So 77 times. Listen to the closeness of this. 77 times or 70 times 7. So they're close there. But anyway, be that as it may, the scholars are not really sure whether, there's some that really believe it's probably meant 77 times. And they think that it may be related to Lamech. I believe it is Lamech in Genesis chapter 4, about verse 23. Back in the day when it was talking about retribution to Cain in the event that his life was taken, that he would be punished 7 times. And Lamech, he killed somebody, and he uses the word 70 times 7. He multiplies Cain's punishment of those who would harm Cain. He multiplies that by 10, 77. Again, that's Genesis chapter 4, verse 23. So there's some that have a belief this may be a reference back to that. They believe that certainly back in that text that it does refer to 77 times. And so it is believed that this here may be an allusion to that, where that was with reference to retribution. In this context, we're talking about forgiveness. We're talking about how we're to forgive a brother. And so, whether it's 77 times or 70 times 7, which is 490, the point is the same. That, and who's going to keep a record? If it was 7, you can just see them law keeping, keep this record. So you've offended me, you've hurt me once, twice, 3 times, 6 times, you better not do it more time. There's that mentality. You offend me one more time and you're in trouble. God doesn't want us to be calculating. He doesn't want us to be tabulating our offenses or someone's offenses toward us. And so 77 or 490, the whole point is, we're not to be keeping a record. We're not to keep score. We're not to limit our forgiveness. Our forgiveness is to be patterned after the Lord's forgiveness. It's to be patterned after God's forgiveness. God's forgiveness is free. God's forgiveness is, continual. God is always forgiving us. And so as we go through this study, we see that the mercy that we extend is to be parallel with the mercy that has been extended to us. Any discussion or thought you may have before we proceed? So let's look here. We've got, Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven. And there's something about the kingdom that is comparable to a king who wishes to settle accounts with his servants. Who is the king? Who is the master? Okay, God, man. And so we're talking about here the spiritual. We're looking at the physical, but a parable is something that uses a physical lesson or story to teach a spiritual lesson. And so he speaks about a king or a master, but that relates to, or that pictures God, our master. Okay, so God is the king, and who are the servants? Okay, the disciples, the followers. That's in today's terms, that's you and me, Christians. You and I are the servants. And so let's think about just a moment about the debt. He says that there was a servant that was brought to him. He probably didn't come willingly. He may have been forced. He may have been being dragged to the king to settle this account. But he owed him 10,000 talents. Let's think for just a moment about the value of 10,000 talents. And depending upon, valuation of gold or silver, whatnot, and it's difficult to put a definite figure on this. We've got 100 denarii. It's coming up in a moment. Someone did some calculation and suggested that to work, for a day laborer to work, that he would have to work about, and this is one person, 20 years. A person would have to work 20 years to earn enough wages to pay this 100 denarii. I may be sitting on that. It was 4 months, I believe.
Just my little reference in the back of my Bible. It says a denarius in this city ESV. Denarius was a day's wage for a laborer, but a talent was about 75 pounds.
A talent is equivalent to 6,000 denarii. And so, anyway, in order to work enough to pay the 10,000 talents would take about 200,000 years. 200,000 years. We're talking about comparing something close to maybe 17 million, just for throwing out figures. If we could compare on the one hand $17 million versus $17. So the one man owed, say, $17 million, and he was owed $17. So there's a contrast, a stark contrast drawn between what the first servant owed that he could not pay versus the other man. Okay? So he says that he began to settle. One was brought to him who owed 10,000 talents. Since he could not pay, his master ordered him to be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. This was something that was prohibited by the law of Moses, so either he was a Gentile or he was a disobedient Jew who would take such action as this, to sell the man into slavery along with his family. So we see here that he begged, he pleaded with the king to extend mercy to him. He says in verse 26, the servant fell on his knees and implored him, have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. Well, I don't know how he would. He couldn't. It was impossible. It was impossible to pay this debt. What does forgiveness mean? What is the basis of forgiveness? What prompts forgiveness? As you look at this parable, this man has this enormous debt. He is forgiven. He is released, let go. What does forgiveness mean? Thank you.
Well, the basis is the mercy provided, grace and mercy provided by the one who's owed.
Okay. So it is an act, an expression of mercy, compassion. It is to release the debt, to cancel it as though it was not there. And so here you have a man who owed an enormous debt. He was forgiven an enormous debt. Again, mercy and love, perhaps, but mercy in this case, there's no reason to believe that the king would have loved this man, this servant, but he did have mercy based upon his pleading. In verse 27, the Bible says, out of pity for him, out of pity, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. The king forgave 10,000 talents. What do you suppose that would do for one to be forgiven of such an enormous debt? Think about Luke chapter 7, in the case of Simon. Jesus come to Simon's house, and this woman who is a sinner, she's anointed the feet of Jesus, wiping his feet with her hair. And he said, Simon did the Pharisee, this woman was a prophet. What kind of woman this is that's touching him? She's a sinner. And Jesus, in that context, in Luke chapter 7, he gave another parable about forgiveness. And he talked about two men who owed a certain amount of money. And one owed a greater amount, one owed a lesser amount. And Jesus said, which one of these two do you suppose would love the most? And Simon the Pharisee answered correctly when he said, he that was forgiven the most. The one who was forgiven the most would love the most. Well, here is a man who has been forgiven 10,000 talents. A debt that it was impossible, never, and it would take several lifetimes to pay that back. So what do you suppose should have been in this man's heart? Appreciation, gratitude. With reference to God and our forgiveness, should there be gratitude? Should there be love? Should you and I love God for what He's done for us, David? Keep on your David. I'm sorry, David.
The significance in my mind
Count at 5. Go ahead.
is that no, significance in my mind is that the valuation of that debt. How many years did you say would possibly be?
200,000.
200,000. It's not just in an earthly sense, from the Jewish perspective. He would owe, not just he would have to pay the debt, but he and all the generations behind him would be obligated to pay that debt for generations to come. So the forgiveness that he received
not sure I absorbed all of what you just said, so bear with me.
The point is that it's just, the forgiveness is much greater than it's much greater in scope.
Okay. That's something that we will talk about in a moment. But so this man, he turns from being forgiven to having this unmerciful attitude toward his fellow servant. So there was something that failed to click, right? Would you say? With reference to the spiritual dimension, you and I are forgiven an enormous debt. Debt because of our sin. You and I can never, never, never repay. You and I can never repay our debt. So, what is Jesus teaching here? That God expects you and me to extend, to pass on to others what we've been given. That's taught in a variety of contexts, not just with forgiveness. That God has blessed us, He has given us, and we're to extend or to share with others what we've received. And we receive God's compassion. We receive His mercy. So you and I need to have gratitude. Again, go back to Psalm 103, 8-12 in just a moment. The Lord is merciful, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love. He will not always chide, nor will He keep His anger forever. He does not deal with us according to our sins, nor repay us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is His steadfast love toward those who fear Him. As far as the east is from the west, so far does He remove our transgressions from us. So God has removed our transgressions. Romans 4:7-8. Blessed, this is a quotation from Psalm 32:1-2 concerning David. Blessed are those whose lawless deeds are forgiven and whose sins are covered. Blessed is the man against whom the Lord will not count his sin. So this first servant has been blessed. That ought to do something. That should strike him at the very core of his being. Every day when he wakes up, he ought to be a different person. I have been forgiven. You and I, every day that we wake up, we're transformed by God's grace, by His mercy, by His forgiveness. What does this 10,000 talents, what does that suggest about the breadth of God's willingness to forgive us? 10,000 talents. Okay? God is willing to forgive. You have Saul of Tarsus, later known as Paul, counted himself as the chief of sinners. He hurt the church. He hurt God's people. And God forgave him. God forgave him. God is willing to forgive. God is not like man. Sometimes we're very limited, very narrow in our willingness to forgive, but not God. Describe the contrast between the mercy the servant received and that which he extended. So he has this servant that comes to him, owes him 100 denarii. Please, forgive me. I will pay you what I owe you. But this man who had been forgiven 10,000 talents, he said no. He seized him, he took him by the neck, and had him imprisoned until he should pay all the debt. He has received what from God? He has received mercy. He has received compassion. What has he given to his fellow servant? Bad time. It's been very painful. Anything else? Another question. Why do we find it find it so difficult to forgive others? Sorry? Because of pride. Where David says that oftentimes we have difficulty forgiving others because of our pride. How does that play into our decision of whether to forgive or not? Our pride.
Holy grudges, how will they go forgive what somebody did to us? But we're so quick to ask God for forgiveness for all of our sins. Yet, whenever one of our brothers or sisters transgresses us, it's hard for us to let that go because it's human nature for us to hold on to things, hold grudges.
Might make you feel weak. You're trying to be strong.
Okay. Could we feel like it's a sign of weakness to forgive?
Or even we did that to me. Not somebody else, you did it to me. Therefore,
So this talked about holding grudges. What's the difference between, on the one hand, forgiving someone and holding a grudge? What do we do when we're holding a grudge? What are some of the emotions? What are some of the feelings, the actions that we often participate in when we're holding that grudge? And we have anger, we have resentment perhaps. What else?
it's not a problem.
Okay, it really, it does impact us in every way, emotionally and physically and spiritually. Missy? Okay, avoid them. Okay, sometimes when we hold that grudge, we avoid them. Is that proper behavior for Christians to avoid each other? It's not. So a person who is a person who is holding that grudge, there is a sense of wanting vengeance and retaliation. I want to get you back. You hurt me, you offended me, and you won't do it again. And I want to make you pay. Is that sometimes the attitude that we have?
You want them to feel like you're hurt, you want them to.
Okay, you hurt me. Maybe you humiliated me. And I want you to feel as bad or worse. I want you to feel worse than I felt. Sorry.
You sometimes, in that manner, you will not forgive because you want control. You want to make them feel bad. You want to show them that you are in control of the situation. You don't step out. We have to look at God who has all authority. And he showed compassion. And then we have no authority, and we want to take, authority that is not ours.
Thank you. Very good point. We want to be in control, the verse says. We want to let them know that, if there's any forgiveness coming to you, it will be on my timetable. It will be when I'm ready to extend it, and not 1 hour before. Georgia? Thank you for that. And so, you talk about being in touch with the Scriptures. There's a difference between the man who is the spiritual man and the carnal man. The carnal man, the worldly man, the man who thinks like the world, has adopted the world's values. That person is not going to respond very favorably or in a positive way to being offended. And so we've got to have our minds filled with the Word of God to to be thinking in terms of, to think in godly terms, so that we can be equipped, prepared to respond scripturally to such offenses as we talked about earlier in verse 15. Yes, yes, sir.
Another scripture here and that is says that love does not take account. But if you're loving someone, it's saying here that you don't even take account of it.
So, thank you. 1 Corinthians 13. Love is willing to forgive. Doesn't keep records, doesn't keep score. Hatred does. Hatred keeps a record. Hatred wants to seek retaliation, vengeance. What did the Master call the unforgiving servant in verse 32? He called him a wicked servant. A wicked servant. You and I, in the day of judgment, we don't want to hear those kind of words. We don't want to hear Jesus describe us as a wicked servant. Give some reasons you and I must forgive those who trespass against us. Some reasons that you and I must forgive those who trespass against us. Okay? God demands it. God requires it. What difference does it make whether I forgive or not?
It's called sin.
Okay? So if I refuse to forgive, I am sinning against God. Or did you say something?
God also indicated that, in other words, our forgiveness is hinged upon forgiveness.
Matthew chapter 6, Jesus was teaching about prayer, long prayer, and he said, if you don't forgive, then neither will your heavenly Father forgive you. So in order for you and me to be forgiven, it is imperative that we forgive others. Jesus says, if you don't forgive, God's not going to forgive you. Georgia? Okay, Romans chapter 13. Romans 13. I think it's 12. I think it's 13. Romans 13. We're not to be seeking vengeance. Vengeance belongs to me, saith the Lord. And talks about as much as life in you, live peaceably with all men. So we're not to retaliate. We are to forgive. Do good to those who harm us. Verse 35. What is the meaning or the significance of the phrase "from your heart"? If you do not forgive your brother, quote, "from your heart."
Really mean it, not just say it.
Okay? So it's got to be more than words. You harm me. I can say it's okay. I can smile. I can be deceitful. I can lie through my teeth and say, "It's fine." People do that, right? People say it's okay when it's not okay, when they really haven't forgiven. It's got to be from the heart. From the heart. It's not just words. It's not just words on paper or words from the lips. It's got to be from the heart. And how do you know when it's from the heart? Sorry?
Their reaction or action in response to you.
Okay? So it's got to do with our response to the person, our behavior toward them. As Missy said a while ago, we're not avoiding them. We're not shunning them. We are allowing this person to be a part of our lives. We're speaking to them. We're being kind. We're not retaliating. We're letting it go. letting bygones be bygones, if I can use that expression. It's water under the bridge. We're moving forward. I have forgiven you. I love you. You're my brother. And we're gonna fight this fight and run this race together. 3 lessons. God can and will forgive any amount of sin when we seek His mercy. Number 2, the disciple of Christ who will not forgive a fellow disciple will not receive God's forgiveness. And we should be willing to forgive those who have sinned against us when they seek our mercy because God has forgiven us.